Since the game launched, there's been a growing number of women playing, which is obviously great for us as women in the game. Back in the 2013-14 season, there were 159,000 female managers out there. This year, there are 355,072 to be precise, women playing the game. So there has been a big growth of that. At the same time, though, the number of men playing the game has risen significantly more. So back in 2012-13, there were 2.4 million men playing the game. And this year, there's 7.1 million. So in terms of growth, the number of women actually playing, it is growing, but not at the same rate as the number of men. Yet in the community, there are lots of you presenting for us and kind of flying the flag for women in the game. And of course, across the community generally, there's a number of women content creators out there. What do you think about the growth of female presence in the game and indeed people's attitude towards women as part of the FPL community?
I think the growth of women in FPL is only natural. Within football as a whole, we are seeing female presence grow when it comes to commentators, pundits, journalists. So that spillover is natural. I don't think it's too worrying that the figures don't match to the number of men that are playing the game, simply because this is all still so new, seeing women on screen and being treated equally, you know, and being respected in their own rights to speak on these topics. So I think with time that will grow. And in terms of attitudes, I think us being so open with our teams, for example, on Twitter and giving our thoughts goes a long way to, I guess, bringing down barriers and challenging people's mindsets, because this is obviously, there's a lot of luck that's involved in the game, but there's also the element of studying the game and players and so on. We all sit there and we take our time. So I think a lot of men who maybe question women's role in this have to respect that. Like, the numbers that you see at the end of the week aren't a fluke in many chances. So I think we're slowly chipping away at old mindsets, and in a few years' time, I don't think it'll be a problem at all. I think we'll see many, many more girls playing the game, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I remember when we first started FPL Family, we had a few comments at the very beginning, which were like, you know, because it's obviously myself and my husband, and they'd be like, don't listen to her, listen to him. And as Jules will testify, having had us on the FPL show for years, actually, what's happened is that I've beaten him for the last 4 seasons in a row. And I think actually that kind of the change came fairly quickly, with people going, oh, hang on a minute, actually she does know what she's talking about, because the decisions that she's making seem to kind of go a long way. And I think that attitude might be there at the beginning, but it's very quickly eroded by people realizing that actually, you know, we do often know what we're talking about as well.
Yeah, I definitely listen to your advice more than Lee's, Sam. Whenever you're on the show, I'm always looking at you for the advice, not Lee. Only joking. But yeah, no, completely. I think that I was actually quite surprised by those numbers, though, if I'm honest, because I would have thought that from the amount of girls that I speak to on Twitter or on Instagram, and just from my friends and all the people at work as well, all the girls at work, I would have thought that the number would have been higher than that. So I am actually a bit surprised. But like Anita's just said, I don't think it's necessarily a concern, because I think that naturally that is just going to continue to grow. That number isn't going to get lower. That number's only going to get higher. Yeah. It's not a worrying thing. I am surprised that it's not more, just because there are a lot of girls that play FPL. There are a lot of there are a lot of FPL female accounts on Twitter as well. And so, yeah, I'm surprised that it's not more than that. But then I think that it says a lot about the game as a whole, that the numbers have grown as incredibly as they have. I mean, to go from 2 million to 7 million in the space of 4 seasons, that's about right, isn't it? 4 or 5 seasons. It's like, that's crazy. Like, the numbers are mad. Like, the amount of people that play, to say that there are over 7 million people playing FPL right now around the world is quite amazing. So I can only imagine that number is going to continue to grow, and with that will bring more female FPL players as well, because now, like Anita was saying, there are a lot more females in broadcast, in sport, and in football particularly. So there are going to be more females that are going to be interested in football. There are going to be more females that feel comfortable talking about it, that feel comfortable playing something like FPL. So I can imagine that number only continuing to grow, really.
And I do think that for a lot of the, like you say, there's a lot of women in the Twitter community, the Instagram community, that are quite active, and then obviously you guys in the presenting community. And I wonder actually whether there is an element of kind of a bit more ballsiness from the women that says, no, actually, I'm quite good at this game, and they'll put themselves out there a little bit more. Whereas I think there's a lot of men that play it that you don't necessarily see or hear from in the community, whereas women represent quite well for the numbers that they have playing the game. And I think, you know, there's a lot of women out there in the countries where the Premier League is now reaching with much greater force, that we might then start to see a growth in women in those areas too.
I just, with Jules's point there, I think as well as there's so many more women that are now, you know, liking sport and liking football and working in football as well, I think there's also an element of girls that maybe aren't as interested in football thinking that you have to know football inside out to play the game. And that's probably why they're a little bit put off and don't want to join in. But obviously we obviously sit here and all of us know football, but my little sister doesn't really, and she plays it. And in leagues, I've got one of my friends, his girlfriend that plays it, and she's got no interest in football, but she's quite good. You know, when you've got people there that you can talk to and you know, you can get advice from, you don't necessarily need to know football like properly. You know, it's a really fun game for everyone to play. And I think, like you said, all those numbers will definitely just continue to rise. And that's where I think, you know, like if people get partners involved or you try and get your friends involved, that listen, you don't need to know football. It's just a really fun game, but obviously it's addictive and you've got to pay attention to it. Like it's not just something that you can, you know, do once, then you leave it for the rest of the season. It's a weekly thing where you have to, you know, really take your time if you want to be good at it, but it is really fun and everyone that plays it loves it. So hopefully those numbers can keep going, because it's definitely perfect for everyone.
Yeah, I know a lot of people as well whose girlfriends have just taken up, like a lot of the WhatsApp groups I'm in are predominantly male, but then their girlfriends want to know what they're talking about, so they get involved. And there's one of my WhatsApp groups, my friend called Dean, his girlfriend Helen kind of got involved, not a big football fan, but she just seems to have these massive hauls. And now she's like, we joke about her being like the Oracle, and she's not a massive football fan. I think as long as you've got that competitive edge, and you're just looking at stats a lot of the time, ultimately, aren't you? Obviously, it helps to understand other elements of the game as well, but you don't need to have this massive football bank of knowledge, as you've said. And I think for me, having experienced some sexism on social media and in other aspects of my job, with FPL, I haven't really as much, because it does feel like there is a real community. And I feel like when we talk about teams, an FPL team's an FPL team.
Yeah. When
you look at an FPL team, you don't necessarily know if it's owned or managed, I should say, by a male or by a female, if you know what I mean. It's just an FPL team, and I think that's what's quite nice. I find it quite, for me personally, I know it won't be the same for everyone, it's a bit more gender neutral in that it's quite equally as accessible to men and women, I think personally. And like you've said, actually some of women's other skill sets might actually help them be even more successful FPL managers.
Yeah, and I do think that having the likes of you guys in the public eye, on TV presenting the FPL show, on the podcasts, presenting at football matches, it is kind of inspiring to a lot of women out there, and a lot of women that will not necessarily have thought, oh, I can get involved in this, but they look at, you know, other people doing it and they think, well, why not? I'll give it a go. And it is one of those games where you can just pick it up and give it a go. You don't have to be particularly brilliant at anything to play FPL and to be good at FPL. It just takes a little bit of time and commitment and the ability to get a little bit addicted, but you know, that's okay.
Sam, the one thing I would say as well is, I'm not going to include you in this, and I think Jules and Liv will agree with me on this, you don't have to be incredible to play FPL. Like, as a woman, there's not like a real pressure. Sam, you're like an exception because you're always at the top 10,000 in the world, but myself, Jules and Liv all play it, all live, breathe, eat, sleep FPL, and we're okay at it, and we still love it, and we're still able to do our jobs. So I think FPL, yes, it's brilliant to win, but it is all about the highs and lows, sharing them with loads of other people and taking part. I know that's a bit cliche, but I think with FPL that is so prevalent. It's just like a big community where it doesn't matter. It's so unlikely that you're ever going to win or come in the top 100,000. Even the top 100,000 is hard. And I think that's what's quite nice about it. We all just go into it not really thinking we're going to win, but it's for those little wins that we get along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think as well, like when you girls were all saying about, you know other girls that play that aren't really into football. I know a friend of mine who wasn't really into football, decided to start playing FPL, and now like loves football. So FPL for her was actually her way into actually liking football. So I love that about FPL. I love the fact that that sort of fun element of football that isn't necessarily the scary part where you feel like you're going to get judged because you're a girl that likes football and wants to talk about football. It can actually be that way in for you, because you can play FPL and then that way people think, oh, actually, are you into football then? And before you know it, you're watching every game, you're following it every single week, and you end up knowing more about football than some of the boys in the office, for example, if I'm using my mate as an example. So yeah, I do think that FPL is a great way to sort of bring more girls into actually liking football, but also playing the game as well. So hopefully that'll only continue to grow.
I think it starts at a small age as well. I mean, my littlest, she spends her time now saying who got the assist, because she hears me say that so often. And, you know, we will have BT on a Saturday and she'll be like, oh, mummy, it's Jules. And you know, and I think that whole community, that the more that we as women in the game play it, the more it has a knock-on impact on allowing access to other women to kind of feel like they want to get involved. And, you know, my little one, she's only 5, but it won't be that long till I'm pretty sure she'll be having a FPL team of her own. She knows nothing about the game apart from when, you know, Harry Kane scores, and then of course she knows that. But otherwise, she's not bothered. But she's interested, and I think that's the first port of call for women to just have a go.